a gift to Damask from the Council of Elders on the occasion of Yenchor's seating in the Senate, the towering reptilian condemned murderer shuffled to the center of the energy field that defined his cage on Abora, and with confusion contorting the features of his beaked face, prostrated himself on the permacrete floor and mumbled in basic,
"I'm honored to be here, and to perform whatever tasks you require of me."
Standing at the field's shimmering perimeter, 114D pivoted his head toward Plagueis.
"Congratulations, Magister. At last he responds to your suggestion. You have undermined his resolve."
That resolve, Plagueis had learned after more than 2 years of experimentation on the Yenchori, was in fact a kind of force bubble, fashioned by the turtle-like alien's limited number of unusually willful midichlorians. This suggested that the Yenchori was actually strong in the Force, despite his pitifully low count. The discovery had come as a breakthrough, and Plagueis was still grappling with the implications. The Force bubble itself was similar to those generated by creatures that drew on the Force to avoid predation by natural enemies. The relationship between the arboreal Isalamir and its adversary, the Vornsker, provided a curious example, in that the latter was attracted to the former by the very mechanism the Isalamir employed as a defense. Where an extremely low midichlorian count might have bolstered the odds of survival, nature had instead made the Isalamir species strong in the Force, so strong, in fact, that several of the creatures acting in concert could create a force bubble encompassing kilometers rather than meters. In a sense, the Jedi Order had done the same on a galactic scale, Plagueis believed, by bathing the galaxy in the energy of the light side of the Force, or more accurately, by fashioning a force bubble that had prevented infiltration by the dark side, until Tenebrous' master had succeeded in bursting the bubble, or at least shrinking it. How the Order's actions could be thought of as balancing the Force had baffled generations of Sith, who harbored no delusions regarding the Force's ability to self-regulate. The Yenchori former convict wasn't the only new addition to Plagueis' island facility. In the 11 years that had elapsed since the capture of Venemus and the recruitment of Sidious, Plagueis had collected more than a dozen beings of diverse species and had been subjecting them to a wide range of experiments involving volition, telepathy, healing, regeneration, and life extension, with some promising results. As for the Bith would-be Sith Lord, he was alive and well, though kept comatose more often than not, and always under the watchful photoreceptors of 114D or a host of custodial droids. Plagueis hadn't lost interest in Venemus by any means, but the Yenchori's immunity to force suggestion, an immunity the species shared with Hutts, Toydarians, and others, had provided him with a new line of investigation. Unlike Isilamiri, which created a force bubble in the presence of danger, the Yenchori were in perpetual state of involuntary immunity to force suggestion. The fact that immunity was in a sense hardwired into them meant that the ability was an adaptation prompted by a past threat to the survival of the species. To Plagueis, it meant that the Yenchori's midichlorians had evolved to provide protection to a species that was naturally strong in the Force. If that were indeed the case, then the Yenchori were living proof that the Sith of the Bane line had been on the right path from the very start. For while toppling the Jedi Order and the Republic was essential to the task of restoring order to the galaxy, that goal belonged to the realm of the ordinary, to the world that was nothing more than a byproduct of the eternal struggle between the light and dark forces, both of which were beyond any concepts of good or evil. The greater goal of the Sith involved toppling the Force itself and becoming the embodiment of the galaxy's animating principle. It had been theorized by Jedi and Sith alike that balance between the light and dark sides was actually under the guidance of a group of discorporate entities, the ones called the Celestials perhaps, who had merged themselves with the Force thousands of generations earlier and had continued to guide the fate of the galaxy ever since. In effect, a higher order of intermediaries, whose powers were beyond the understanding of mortal beings. But many Sith viewed the notion with disdain, for the theoretical existence of such a group had little bearing on the goal of making the Force subservient to the will of an enlightened elite. Only the Sith understood that sentient life was on the verge of a transformative leap, that through the manipulation of midichlorians, or the overthrow of the forceful group that supervised them, the divide between organic life and the Force could be bridged, and death could be erased from the continuum. As evidenced by those few lords who had managed to perpetuate their spirits after physical death, foremost among them Emperor Vitiate, who was said to have lived 1,000 years, the ancient Sith had come halfway across that bridge. But those few had been so focused on worldly power that they had ended up trapping themselves between realms. That they had never provided the Order with guidance from beyond attested to the fact that their influence had been negligible and had long since faded from the world. In the same way that the Plagueis Sith had been responsible for their own extinction, the great dark side lords of the past had doomed themselves to the nether realm through their attempts to conquer death by feeding off the energies of others, rather than by tapping the deepest strata of the Force and learning to speak the language of the midichlorians. Plagueis was finally learning to do that, and was just beginning to learn how to persuade, prompt, cajole, and coax them into action. Already he could command them to promote healing, and now he had been successful in enticing them to lower their defenses. If he could compel a murderous Yanchori to become peaceful, could he, with a mere suggestion, accomplish the opposite by turning a peaceful being into a murderer? Would he one day be able to influence the leaders of worlds and systems to act according to his designs, however iniquitous? Would he one day conquer not only death but life as well, by manipulating midichlorians to produce forceful beings, even in the absence of fertilization, as Darth Tenebrous might have attempted to do with gene-splicing techniques and computers? Perhaps, but not until the singular flame of the light side was extinguished from the galaxy. Not until the Jedi Order was stamped out.